Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Legally Speaking. The erstwhile princely state of Jammu and Kashmir is in control of three sovereign countries, India, Pakistan and China. This has led to a political stalemate on Kashmir. Dr. Aman Hingorani has, in his book, Unravelling the Kashmir Knot, come up with a new idea to use law as a means to break this political stalemate and alter the current political discourse on Kashmir. Before we discuss how law can be used for this purpose, we'll have Aman laying out the whole ground on why he chose to write this book, the whole 20 years of research that has gone into it, in his research from the British archives. And before all that, I would like to also mention that we have a very special guest on today's episode. He is Justice Ahmadi, former Chief Justice of India, along with Aman Hingorani. Welcome, sir, and welcome, Aman. Sir, what comments would you like to make on the book written by Aman Hingorani?
It's very obvious that he has put in a lot of work on the research, and complete, you see, the research has been done on all aspects touching the Kashmir knot. And therefore, I congratulate him for having come out with a wonderful book which unravels all the issues concerning the dispute, or one might say disputed territory of Jammu and Kashmir. He has also gone a step further, namely also to suggest a way out of this knot, which is a bold step, if I may say so. People don't want to speak about it because of hue and cry that what happened to what Farooq Abdullah the other day spoke about, how to go about it, and he put one of the issues. So it's a very touchy subject, and I must say Amar has been bold enough to take on to that touchy subject.
This is Aman's book, Unravelling the Kashmir Knot, and in this book, Aman concludes from his research that the Kashmir issue was created by the British for their geostrategic objectives. We'll go and ask Aman, why does he say that?
Well, I have relied primarily on British archives, the telegrams, for instance, between the Viceroy and the Secretary of State, to cull out an official British policy to communalize the subcontinent. The proposition was quite simple, that we, the British, may not have created the Hindu-Muslim differences, but we must sharpen those differences to such an extent that only we, the British, can be the composers, and hence continue to remain on the subcontinent. Now, this policy of communalizing the entire polity assumed a different dimension with the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, when the Indian National Congress did not support Britain's war effort. According to British archives, it was around that period that the British contemplated the partition of the subcontinent, and there was a reason for that. At that point of time, there was the precursor of the Cold War, the Great Game, being played out between Britain and Soviet Russia. The British did not want Russian influence coming southwards towards the Middle East, towards the oil. And they devised many strategies to keep the Russians at bay. One of those strategies was to use Islam as an ideological boundary, because if you see the map, right from Turkey to China, there's Islamic belt, Islamic crescent. The northwest region of the subcontinent falls within this crescent. So once the British realized that they would have to transfer power, the Indian National Congress, which would rule India, would not cooperate with them in the war effort or be a defense ally. The British wanted to keep a slice of India and make that into a friendly state, what we now know as Pakistan. So the rationale of creation of Pakistan was to give the British a defense outpost on the subcontinent. And of course, it subsequently became an ally, joined the Baghdad Pact, CENTO, etc. Now, because that area was Islamic, it is apparent from the British archives that it was the British which formulated the two-nation theory. In fact, there's a telegram of 12th of March 1940, where the British Viceroy has told the Secretary of State in London that I've asked Zafrullah Khan, my member in the Viceroy Council, to draw up the maps of India and Pakistan. This is 1940.
Yes.
12th of March 1940. 10 days later, we have the Lahore Declaration made by the Muslim League.
So essentially you said India, Pakistan is a total British disaster.
I would say partition was scripted. The way they scripted, the British scripted the decline of the Ottoman Empire, I've drawn the comparison between what happened in India and the Middle East. Partition was scripted because the British wanted that area, the slice of land, which fell within that Islamic crescent. Now, if you see all the constitutional plans, Stafford Cripps plan, British Cabinet Mission plan, they all contemplate fracture of the subcontinent. The British went ahead anyways and drew up the blueprint of partition, which was telegrammed by the Viceroy to the Secretary of State on 6th of February 1946, which is almost verbatim the Ratcliffe Award of 1947.
So you're saying the British, in a way, for their geopolitical interest, partitioned India and Pakistan. It had nothing to do with the Hindu-Muslim dispute, but their geopolitical fight with Russia, and they wanted a wedge between India and Russia somewhere to have their say.
They took advantage of the Hindu-Muslim differences to promote their own interest on the subcontinent. Now, we had this blueprint being a telegram in 1946. Then we had I've talked about the British complicity in the direct action, communal killings, which eventually led the Indian National Congress to accept partition. So we have a political agreement of 3rd June 1947 that there would be a referendum in Northwest Frontier Province, which was Congress ruled. The British had to do something to have that gifted to the Muslim League. Partition of Bengal and Punjab on the basis of the two-nation theory. As far as the princely Indian states are concerned, that's very important because Kashmir, or the state of Jammu and Kashmir, was a princely Indian state governed by a sovereign ruler owing allegiance to the British Crown.
Yes.
It was one of the 560 odd states. The British were ambiguous about the princely Indian states right till the end, and the cabinet mission plan basically talked about the British sovereignty lapsing. In other words, these 560 states would become legally sovereign.
Legally sovereign states.
Sovereign states. That's the view taken by Pakistan throughout. That is the view ultimately taken even by the Indian Supreme Court.
Yes.
So these states were legally sovereign in law. They were legally sovereign in the fullest sense of that term. And this arrangement was crystallized in British statutes, the Indian Independence Act 1947 and the Government of India Act 1935, which provided for this mechanism. In this entire scheme of things, the British assumed that the Muslim majority J&K, contiguous to Pakistan, would accede to Pakistan,
Yes.
or at least be within the sphere of influence, like a Northern Ireland.
Yes.
And when that did not happen, it is the British who laid down or created the Kashmir issue. We all forget that Jammu and Kashmir was not part of India on 15th August 1947.
It was not part of
It was not part of India. The ruler who, under these acts, enacted pursuant to the political agreement, was the only authority to offer accession, India, Pakistan, or stay independent, and he wanted to stay independent. And I've talked about in the book the circumstances why the ruler chose to come to India. Now he came to India on 26 October 1947. He unconditionally acceded in terms of the law which created India and Pakistan to India in the three areas, which was the communication, defense, and external affairs. And the state became an integral part of India.
the state, as in including POK.
The entire state, including northern areas, POK, it became part of India. That could have been fatal for the British Great Game,
Yes.
because northern areas is separated from Soviet Russia only by a very thin territory of Afghanistan. And so I've documented how 5 days after the accession, on the night of 31st October 1947, the British Gilgit Scouts took into custody the governor of the ruler,
Yes.
hoisted Pakistani flag on what was then Indian territory,
The British
hoisted,
illegally helped Pakistan and occupied.
they did a coup of the northern areas, they hoisted, the British officers hoisted Pakistani flag on Indian territory. Ask Peshawar, you take it over.
So you mean POK is a creation of the British?
This is the northern areas.
The northern areas.
At that point of time, India and Pakistan were dominance of the British. King was still the formal head. Indian and Pakistan armies were headed by British officers. They felt free to draw up the lines between all around Kashmir, and they had earmarked 2 areas in 1947 itself, which must be kept free from Indian control. So one area was the northern area, which I mentioned, where there was a coup. The other is what we call Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, a narrow strip. And the British strategists said why we must keep that free from Indian control is, should India go to war against Pakistan to recover northern areas, it will liquidate Pakistan, defeating the very rationale of partition.
Yes.
And so, the British officers earmarked these 2 areas to be kept free from Indian control.
At this moment, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, Aman has highlighted in his book that India's stand on Kashmir was misconceived right from 1947. Why does he say that? I'll ask Aman. Aman, why do you say that India's stand has been misconceived since 1947?
You see, as far as India, as Justice MD pointed out, agreed to the plebiscite. Later on, they sought to say, well, there have been change of circumstances. Pakistan has not vacated the part of the state it was supposed to as per the same UN resolutions. Pakistan has become an ally of the West, cross-border terrorism. So there are change of circumstances. We are not really bound by these United Nations Security Council resolutions, and India may be technically or legally right, but a fallout of that has been on world opinion, which sees India, which is the victim, actually as a person who is trying to wheedle out or wriggle out of after assuming an international obligation or engagement or whatever you want to call it. So we have lost out on the PR battle. We lost on the fallout of that. And as far as I'm concerned, I have, rather than trying to wriggle out or say we are released from the resolution, I have gone a step further to examine whether those resolutions were without jurisdiction. And for that, there's a reason why I give this narrative. They can indeed be many narratives. Many people may have a different take as to what happened on the subcontinent in 1947. But all the narratives will converge on one point.
Yes.
That while India is an ancient civilization, modern day India and Pakistan are creations of the British statutes enacted by the British Parliament pursuant to the political agreement of 3rd June 1947 between the British, Muslim League and Congress.
Yes.
So as far as India and Pakistan are concerned, they are creations of the same law. And that law was a constitutional law. And that constitutional law, in fact, was a controlled constitution. A controlled constitution is one which demarcates the powers of the creations of the state, executive, legislature, judiciary. So this law was a controlled constitution. And the government of India, and for that matter, the government of Pakistan, was bound by whatever powers were given in that law. Now, as per that law, I've already mentioned, which reflected the political agreement, it was the ruler who was the sovereign in the state, not the people. It was a ruler who was the only one competent to offer accession to India or Pakistan or stay independent. And this had nothing to do with the religious complexion of the people of that state.
So the rulers had the power to decide which country he should
go
side.
Or even to stay independent.
Or he could have stayed
independent.
So he could go to India, he could go to Pakistan, or he should have get sovereign.
And I pointed out the ruler of Jammu and Kashmir was sovereign even as per Indian Supreme Court. Pakistan has always said that.
Yes.
Now, if that is the case, then under what provision of that constitutional law could the government of India have laid down a contrary policy that the future of state will be decided by the people?
Yes. So you mean the plebiscite prima facie is a wrong...
There was no power in Government of India to offer plebiscite in the first place, that being inconsistent with the constitution that created modern day India. And since the same law created Pakistan, it would be fair to say that the law which created Pakistan itself makes the entire state part of India.
Okay.
Now, if you test it one step further, if you see that the ruler acceded it to India only in 3 areas. He expressly retained his sovereignty regarding the other areas.
Yes.
He was a sovereign despite accession, and it is consistent in common law that one sovereign can cede certain powers to another sovereign and still retain sovereignty while the rest of the matters. The ruler was not before the United Nations.
Yes.
How can the United Nations say the future of the state will be decided in this manner, in the absence of the ruler?
So the ruler has not agreed to it. India unilaterally went and said that the plebiscite, they agreed to a plebiscite.
They agreed to plebiscite because that was a commitment they made domestically, and they repeated on the floor of the House.
To the British.
On the floor of the House to the United Nations, giving standing to everybody in the world, notably Pakistan, to comment on Kashmir. That was the British strategy, to take it outside India's domestic jurisdiction. But the point is, United Nations has no power over the state in the absence of the sovereign ruler.
Yes.
And it's not that the United Nations did not know where the sovereignty was located. If you see the UN resolutions, they all talk about the plebiscite administrator to get the powers from the rule of the state, not from New Delhi.
Yes.
So the United Nations Security Council knew that it was the ruler, and this was beyond the competence of India under the constitution that created India to make such a statement or
So now to change this whole narrative, you allude to the fact in your book that India has an option of going to the International Court of Justice.
I put it very simply. It is India which gave a disputed territory status to Kashmir.
Yes.
It is India which gave the tag to that territory that this is a disputed territory.
Yes.
Today we may say it's not disputed, it's an integral part of India, but the whole world says it's disputed. It's still on the agenda of the United Nations Security Council, number one. It is India which has internationalized the Kashmir issue.
Yes.
We went to the UN.
So even it is our fault that
we went to the UN, we took what was within India's domestic jurisdiction, and we, by repeating our commitment to plebiscite or referendum or whatever you want to say, we have given the world a standing to comment on what has happened.
What was
in
our
Kashmir.
issue in our jurisdiction, a domestic issue, we took it out.
So India gave the disputed territory tag, India internationalized it. Unless you're able to get rid of that disputed territory tag, nothing will happen.
Okay.
Nothing will work in Kashmir. Kashmir issues not the Kashmir Valley alone or cross-border terrorism. Kashmir issues the entire state.
Yes.
Kashmir Valley is only 9% of the state.
Yes.
Now, I'll give you an example. I say I have a house.
Yes.
Then I say, I'm not sure of the title to this house.
Yes.
Somebody gets in. I say, please vacate.
Yes.
They say, you don't know your own title.
So how can you vacate?
I say, this is a terrorist movement.
Yes.
They say, this is a jihad.
Yes.
Who will decide? It has to be a court of law whose views is authoritative.
So that's why you say go to the international.
And that's the reason I say take the Kashmir issue to the United Nations, limited to the 8 propositions I formulated in the book,
yes,
which all are geared to show, to confirm, as it were, India's title to Kashmir.
Yes.
Was New Delhi competent to introduce wishes of the people as a factor to decide the future of the state? And if not, what are the implications of that in international law?
That's an important point. Now, before I take your closing comments on this issue, I will take a comment from Justice Ahmadi. You've seen the argument that has been presented by Aman in the book as well as on the interview. How would you sum it up? How would you like to sum it up?
As I looked at it, going to the international court, who should take the initiative is the first question.
Yes.
Should India take the initiative, or should it be taken suo motu, or would Pakistan like to move the?
Yes.
Because if you are taking the initiative, the whole question of proof, etc., will fall on you.
Yes.
So that is a matter which needs a very serious attention.
Yes.
I think what Aman has said is that in the circumstances there is no other alternative.
Yes.
Going to the international forum is, if it is the only alternative, it will be a political decision to take for the government of India.
And Aman, what if we don't succeed at the International Court of Justice?
Well, what can the ICJ say? That the wishes of the people were relevant? India has always maintained that the people of the state have, through the State Constituent Assembly, the state's constitution, already expressed their wish to be an integral part of India. So India, we just fall back in the current situation. So we don't really lose anything, and so I say it's certainly worth a shot to try to depoliticize the Kashmir issue and get a finding in our favor. And the ICJ, I'm hopeful, for the reasons I've given in the book, is likely to find in India's favor.
Likely to find is India's favor. So Aman says that ICJ is likely to find it in India's favor. To know more about the reasons why Dr. Aman Hingorani advocates that India should go to the International Court of Justice to change the political narrative on the Kashmir issue, you must read this book called Untying the Kashmir Knot. That's it for now. Thank you so much for joining us on this issue of Legally Speaking. But before we conclude, I would like to give a special note of thanks. Thank you so much, Justice Ahmadi sir, for sparing your time and joining us for this issue. Thank you so much, Aman, for joining us. That's it for this issue of Legally Speaking. Thank you so much.